Midnight does not ask permission before it presses on a man. Rain hits the windows of the station, fluorescent light drains the color from the room, and the cold steel of the handcuffs keeps announcing itself against the wrists. Across the table, voices lean in. Papers wait. A pen sits close enough to become a threat. The demand is simple: sign what is not true, and maybe the pressure will stop. That is the first appearance. Epictetus would tell you to slow down right there, before panic takes the chair. The event is one thing: a person is being pressured in a police station. The impression is another: this must be obeyed now, because fear says escape is the only good left. But fear is not a judge. Fear is only a force knocking at the door of assent. The handcuffs are not the deepest chain in the room. The deeper chain would be agreeing that your worth, your reason, and your next word belong to the pressure outside you. They do not. The outcome is not yours to command. The timing is not yours. The opinions in the room are not yours. The rain, the hour, the accusation, the past, none of these enter your ruling faculty unless you hand them the key. So the first work is not dramatic. It is smaller, harder, and cleaner. Notice the impression, refuse to bow to it too quickly, and govern the next response. The boundary of control is not a comforting idea when the room is warm, the coffee is fresh, and nothing is at stake. It becomes real when the door is closed, the clock is past midnight, and another person believes pressure is a tool. That is when philosophy stops being decoration. That is when it either stands up inside the mind, or it was never learned at all. The handcuffs are real. The station is real. The rain is real. The accusation is real. The voices across the table are real. Stoicism does not ask a person to pretend otherwise. Epictetus does not teach a man to deny the wall in front of him, the metal on his wrists, or the fear moving through his chest. He teaches him to divide the scene correctly. Here is the first division. What is happening is not the same as what it means. What is happening? You are seated in a police station. You are being pressured to sign a statement that is not true. You feel the cold steel of the cuffs. You hear the rain. You hear the demand. You see the paper. What the mind adds: if I do not end this now, I am finished. If I do not satisfy them, I will be destroyed. If I resist, the pressure will become unbearable. If I sign, maybe I can breathe. That second list is not the event. It is judgment moving quickly under fear. This is where many people lose command of themselves. Not because they are weak, but because they confuse pressure with authority. Pressure can lean on the body. Pressure can crowd the room. Pressure can raise its voice, repeat the question, stretch the silence, and make the minutes feel like punishment. But pressure cannot decide what you believe unless you give it assent. It cannot make a false sentence become true inside your own ruling faculty. It cannot force your judgment to call escape a higher good than integrity. The external value being inflated here is escape. The mind says, escape is everything. Escape is worth more than truth. Escape is worth more than self-command. Escape is worth more than the next honest word. And once escape becomes the highest good, the person becomes easy to steer. Anyone who promises relief becomes master. Anyone who threatens discomfort becomes master. The pen becomes master. The paper becomes master. The fear becomes master. Epictetus would not begin by asking, how do I control the room? He would ask, what part of this belongs to me? The outcome does not belong to you. The timing does not belong to you. The opinion of the people across the table does not belong to you. Their tone, their suspicion, their impatience, their private thoughts, their next move, none of it belongs to you. Your reputation outside this room does not sit under your command. The past cannot be rewritten by anxiety. The rain will not stop because you prefer a calmer night. But your judgment belongs to you. Your assent belongs to you. Your intention belongs to you. Your attention belongs to you. Your next response belongs to you. That does not make the situation easy. It makes it clear. And clarity matters more than comfort at this hour. Because panic wants to enlarge the territory of the enemy. Panic says, they control everything. Stoic discipline answers, no. They control some externals. They do not control the faculty by which I judge externals. Panic says, this feeling proves I must obey. Stoic discipline answers, this feeling proves only that an impression has arrived. Panic says, sign, and become safe. Stoic discipline answers, safety purchased by surrendering judgment is not safety of the soul. This is not about acting bold. Boldness can be another mask worn by fear. A man can shout and still be ruled from the outside. A man can look calm and still be bargaining away a center. The work is not to perform courage for the room. The work is to keep custody of the one thing the room cannot rightly take, the power to examine, to pause, to refuse falsehood inwardly before any outward sentence is spoken. The handcuffs may limit the hands. They do not have to govern the mind. The cold steel can be used as an anchor, not a verdict. Feel it. Name it. This is metal. This is pressure. This is fear. This is an impression. Then return to the boundary. Not the whole night. Not the whole case. Not the whole future. The next governable action. When the boundary is remembered, the scene becomes narrower. Not pleasant. Narrower. And in that narrow space, freedom begins to take the form of discipline. Now look carefully at the sequence inside the mind, because the order matters. The event arrives first. A table. A paper. A pen. Midnight rain against the station windows. The cold steel of the handcuffs touching skin. A voice saying that signing would make this easier. Another voice implying that refusal will make things worse. That is the event. Then comes the impression. The impression says, this is urgent. This is personal. This is dangerous. You must stop this pressure now. It does not ask permission. It appears quickly, almost before thought can stand up. Epictetus never taught that impressions would wait politely outside the door. They enter. They strike. They announce themselves as truth. But an impression is not yet a judgment. This distinction is the hinge of the whole scene. A human being cannot always prevent the first appearance. The mind sees the cuffs, hears the accusation, feels the pressure, and receives the impression, I am trapped. But the next movement is different. The next movement is where the ruling faculty either examines the impression or bows to it. Judgment says, because I feel trapped, I must be trapped in my choice. Because I am afraid, fear must know what is best. Because escape looks available, escape must be the highest good. That is no longer merely an impression. That is the mind placing a crown on the impression and calling it king. This is how assent happens. Not always with a sentence. Not always out loud. Sometimes assent is a quiet inner agreement. Yes, this fear is telling the truth. Yes, this pressure has authority over my next word. Yes, relief is worth more than examined judgment. Once that agreement is made, the hand moves toward the pen before reason has finished speaking. The danger is not that fear appears. The danger is that fear gets promoted. Fear may knock. Fear may shout. Fear may fill the body with heat or cold. But fear is not a magistrate. It has no rightful office over truth. It can report discomfort. It cannot define duty. It can warn of consequences. It cannot decide what is honorable. It can point toward escape. It cannot prove that escape is good. That is why the pause matters. Not a dramatic pause. Not a pose. Not a performance for the room. A pause inside the ruling faculty. A pause that says, an impression has arrived. I do not have to sign my mind over to it. In that pause, the event and the judgment separate. The event, pressure. The judgment, this pressure must be obeyed. The event, cold steel. The judgment, these cuffs have authority over my character. The event, a false statement in front of me. The judgment, falsehood may become necessary if it gives relief. Stoic discipline cuts between them. No, pressure is pressure. Cuffs are cuffs. A paper is a paper. Rain is rain. A hard hour is a hard hour. None of these are yet commands to betray judgment. None of these can enter the inner citadel unless the mind opens the gate and says, you may govern me. The assent trap is speed. The faster the mind agrees, the less it examines. Panic wants no cross-examination. Panic wants conclusion before clarity. It says, do not think. End this. But the Stoic does not treat speed as wisdom. He treats speed as a warning. When an impression demands immediate obedience, that is exactly when it must be named. This is the impression that escape is everything. This is the impression that pressure has authority. This is the impression that fear should choose my next word. Naming it weakens its disguise. The impression no longer appears as the whole truth. It becomes an object before the mind. And what the mind can observe, it does not have to worship. This is not passivity. It is command at the smallest possible point. The person may not command the room, the accusation, the clock, or the weather. But he can command the act of assent. He can refuse to let fear complete the sentence for him. He can keep his attention on the next governable response, not the imagined totality of the future. The cold steel of the handcuffs returns again. Let it return. Let it remind the mind, there are things attached to the body, and there are things that do not own the judgment. The cuffs may be fastened. Assent is not. The room may be closed. The ruling faculty is not required to sign away its office. Ascesis means training. Not training for a peaceful morning when the mind has already been fed by good sleep and agreeable news. Training for the hour when the body wants relief, the room wants compliance, and the first impulse comes dressed as necessity. Inside this police station, ascesis is not abstract. It begins with the cold steel of the handcuffs. The cuffs are not only an external restraint. They become a test object. Every time the mind runs forward into panic, the steel brings it back to what is present. Not the whole future. Not the imagined headline. Not the face of every person who may misunderstand. This room. This table. This breath. This impression. The practice is simple to describe and difficult to perform. Return, divide, choose. Return to the anchor. The handcuffs press against the wrists. The mind says, I cannot stand this. The Stoic does not argue with the sensation as if sensation were guilty. He notices it plainly. Cold steel. Tightness. Contact. Weight. That is all the senses have reported. They have not reported, you must sign. They have not reported, fear is wise. They have not reported, escape is worth falsehood. The senses deliver material. Judgment builds the sentence. So return to the anchor without making it a master. Feel the cuffs, but do not let the cuffs interpret the night. This is discipline at the level of attention. The mind that cannot hold attention will be dragged by every noise in the room. The mind that can return to one clean fact has begun to recover command. Then divide. Say inwardly, not as a chant, but as examination, this is the event. This is the impression. This is the judgment being offered. The event is pressure to sign a false confession. The impression is that the pressure is urgent, personal, and threatening. The judgment being offered is that fear and escape should decide the next response. Once divided, the scene loses some of its false unity. It no longer appears as one giant command. It becomes parts. And parts can be examined. This is what Epictetus demands from a human being. Not that he control all externals, but that he stop confusing externals with the good. The good is not immediate relief. The good is not the room becoming kind. The good is not everyone understanding you at midnight. The good is the proper use of your own faculty of choice. That faculty is trained in small acts. A slower breath before answering. A refusal to let the next word be chosen by panic. A clear inward statement, I will not call falsehood good because fear wants relief. A return to the question, what is mine to govern right now? This is not passive endurance. Passive endurance merely suffers and waits. Stoic ascesis acts where action is possible. It governs attention. It governs assent. It governs intention. It governs the moral shape of the next response. It does not pretend to govern the entire case, the entire system, the entire night, or the minds of the people across the table. The temptation will be to think too large. Panic loves total pictures. It says, my life is over. It says, everyone will believe this. It says, there is no way through. But these are not facts in the room. They are judgments thrown across the future. Ascesis brings the mind back from that false empire. What is required now? Not victory over every consequence. Not certainty. Not control over reputation. Not a guarantee that justice will move quickly. What is required now is the refusal to surrender judgment to the pressure of escape. The pen may sit on the table. The paper may wait. The rain may continue. The station may feel like a world with no outside. But the practice remains exact. Return to the anchor, divide event from judgment, and choose the next governable action with the ruling faculty still awake. That is how discipline enters the room before panic takes the chair. Conduct begins where panic wants exemption. Panic says, this situation is extreme, so ordinary responsibility no longer applies. It says, because the pressure is unjust, I am allowed to become careless with my own judgment. It says, because another person is using force, I may surrender truth and call it necessity. That is how fear tries to purchase relief at the cost of the ruling faculty. Epictetus would not accept that bargain. A person is responsible first for the use of his own mind. Not for controlling every consequence. Not for forcing other people to be fair. Not for making the room gentle. But for not handing over the office of judgment to whatever external pressure happens to be loudest. In this station, duty is not theatrical. It does not require a speech. It does not require anger. It does not require proving innocence by volume. Duty begins with keeping the inner act clean. The false confession is not merely ink on paper. It is a proposed agreement between fear and the tongue. It asks the mind to say, this is not true, but I will treat relief as higher than truth. That is the value error. Escape has been inflated until it looks greater than the faculty that chooses. But a human being does not become free by making escape his God. He becomes dependent on anyone who can threaten discomfort. Responsibility, then, is exact. Do not let fear choose the word. Do not let the room choose the intention. Do not let the desire for the pressure to stop define what is good. This does not mean controlling the officers. It does not mean controlling the paperwork. It does not mean controlling what someone writes, thinks, suspects, or repeats later. Those are externals. Some may be serious. Some may be painful. Some may shape the next hour in ways you cannot command. Stoic discipline does not soften that fact. It sharpens the boundaries so you do not lose yourself trying to govern what was never yours. Your conduct belongs to you in the form of the next honest response. That response may be brief. It may be plain. It may be restrained. It may refuse the falsehood without hatred. The important thing is not how impressive it sounds. The important thing is whether it comes from examined judgment or from panic wearing the mask of strategy. The wrongly accused suspect has a duty not to become inwardly false because the accusation is false. That is a hard duty, because fear argues with practical language. Fear says, be realistic. Fear says, just survive this minute. Fear says, truth can wait until later. But Stoicism asks a stricter question: what kind of person are you becoming in the act you are about to perform? Not what reputation will you have. Not what outcome can you guarantee. Not what relief can you buy. What use are you making of your own faculty of choice? This is where responsibility and freedom meet. A person may be constrained in body and still responsible in judgment. The handcuffs can limit motion. They cannot require inner consent to falsehood. The midnight hour can increase pressure. It cannot redefine virtue. The rain can make the station feel sealed off from the world. It cannot alter what is yours to govern. So conduct must become quiet and disciplined. Keep the attention close. Keep the sentence honest. Keep the intention free of revenge, panic, and bargaining with falsehood. Do not add corruption to injury. Do not let another person's misuse of power become your misuse of choice. The room may demand surrender in the language of urgency. Stoic responsibility answers in the language of order: event first, impression second, judgment examined, assent withheld until reason has spoken. And at that point, the next action is no longer owned by panic. It belongs again to the ruling faculty. Freedom in this room will not look like open doors. It will not look like applause, proof, rescue, or immediate vindication. At midnight, with rain on the windows and handcuffs cold against the wrists, freedom may look very small. It may look like one clean refusal to let panic speak first. That is enough. Epictetus does not measure freedom by the softness of the hour. He measures it by the condition of the ruling faculty. Is it awake? Is it examining? Is it separating the event from the judgment? Is it refusing to call fear a guide simply because fear is loud? The pressure may continue. The room may not become fair. The paper may remain on the table. The voices may keep pressing. But none of that proves the mind must surrender its office. The person who knows the boundary of control is not untouched by externals. He is not made of stone. He feels the steel, hears the rain, sees the threat, and still refuses to hand judgment over to escape. This is the discipline: do not make relief your master. Do not let the first impression become law. Do not confuse what happens to you with what you must become because of it. A false sentence cannot become honest because fear wants rest. Pressure cannot become authority because it arrived at midnight. The next response still belongs to the faculty that can pause, examine, and choose. The room is not yours to govern. The outcome is not yours to govern. The assent is. Return to what is yours to govern.